These were real meals made by real families. From split-level houses in Ohio to ranch homes in California, dinner had to make sense during one of the most economically challenging decades in modern American history. Inflation was rising, gas was scarce, budgets were tight. Families sat down to hearty, filling meals night after night. So let's dig into 25 ground beef classics that quietly kept America fed through the inflation crisis, gas shortages, and the turbulence of the early 1970s. And if you're enjoying this trip through food history, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what we uncover next. 1. Dutch oven meatloaf with crackers. Nothing captures early 70s ingenuity quite like stretching a meatloaf with a full sleeve of saltines. Between 1972 and 1974, beef prices jumped nearly 40% after herd reductions and price controls under President Nixon created unintended chaos. Home cooks responded the only way they knew how, by making do. The mixture went into a greased Dutch oven, topped with strips of bacon and baked low and slow. The crackers absorbed the fat, giving the loaf a tender, almost airy texture, while the bacon created a glossy mahogany finish. 2. Tater tot casserole. Before Instagram sheet pan dinners, there was tater tot casserole, golden, bubbling, and proudly practical. Introduced in the 1950s, tater tots became a budget hero in the 1970s. A single bag could top an entire casserole and feed 6 people. Ground beef browned with onions formed the base. Cream of mushroom soup mixed with sour cream added creaminess. Cheddar melted across the top. Then came the frozen tots, lined up neatly before heading into the oven. 40 minutes later, you had crispy potatoes on top and creamy, savory filling underneath. 3. Sloppy Joes. Sloppy Joes hit their cultural peak in the early 70s. With 1 pound of ground beef and an inexpensive can of sauce, dinner was handled. Brown the beef, stir in the sauce, simmer, and pile it high onto soft white buns. Sweet, tangy, and unapologetically messy, it was kid favorite and parent lifesaver. No complicated prep, no expensive ingredients, just working class fuel served in front of the television. 4. Beef tacos. The early 70s marked America's first big mainstream embrace of Tex-Mex flavors. Taco kits made exotic food feel accessible. Ground beef simmered with a seasoning packet became the filling for crispy corn shells, topped with lettuce, tomatoes, cheddar, and sour cream. Were they authentic? Not even close, but they were a gateway, an introduction to flavors beyond meat and potatoes. Taco night felt adventurous without being risky. 5. Beef paprikash. Hungarian immigrants brought paprikash to the Midwest long before the 70s, but during tight economic times, ground beef replaced pricier cuts. Onions, sweet paprika, broth, and sour cream created a rich, brick-red sauce poured over egg noodles. It was comforting, deeply flavorful, and budget-conscious, an old-world dish adapted to new-world realities. 6. Stuffed cabbage rolls. Known as golapki or tolted kapusta, stuffed cabbage rolls became Sunday staples in working-class neighborhoods. Tender cabbage leaves wrapped around a mixture of ground beef and rice, then baked in sweet and sour tomato sauce. They took time, they required patience, but they showed care. In an era when many women were still expected to manage the household full-time, these rolls were proof that dinner wasn't just a meal, it was love. 7. TV dinner Salisbury steak. Swanson's frozen dinners boomed as dual-income households increased, but many families recreated Salisbury steak at home. Ground beef patties mixed with breadcrumbs and onion soup mix were pan-fried, then smothered in brown gravy. It wasn't steak, but it didn't need to be. Served in front of the TV, it symbolized convenience meeting nostalgia. 8. Calico beans. A potluck favorite, calico beans combined ground beef, bacon, and several types of beans in a sweet, sticky sauce made from ketchup, brown sugar, mustard, and molasses. It baked into something rich, smoky, and deeply satisfying. Cheap ingredients, big flavor, perfect for feeding a crowd. 9. Johnny Marzetti. This baked pasta casserole, ground beef, egg noodles, tomato sauce, and layers of cheese was a Midwestern legend. Easy to assemble, endlessly adaptable, and perfect for stretching ingredients, it showed up everywhere, from church suppers to school cafeterias. 10. Beef and potato casserole. Layers of thinly sliced potatoes, seasoned ground beef, and creamy mushroom sauce baked into a filling one-dish meal. It was meat and potatoes philosophy in casserole form, simple, hearty, and dependable.
11. Cocktail meatballs. No 1970s gathering was complete without sweet and savory meatballs simmered in chili sauce and grape jelly. They were glossy, toothpick-ready, and surprisingly addictive. The sauce sounded strange but worked beautifully. They weren't about authenticity, they were about hosting with confidence. 12. Cowboy casserole. Ground beef, corn, tomato soup, and cheese topped with biscuit dough baked into a hearty skillet meal. It was bold, filling, and built for hungry families who valued substance over presentation. 13. Beef and rice skillet. One pan, ground beef, rice, vegetables, broth. Simmered together until tender and flavorful. Minimal cleanup, maximum payoff. Efficiency was the point. Hamburger stew. On cold winter nights, hamburger stew simmered for hours. Ground beef, potatoes, carrots, celery, tomatoes, and broth. It was practical, comforting, and endlessly stretchable. 14. Cheeseburger pie. Thanks to Bisquick's impossible pie magic, ground beef and cheddar baked into a self-forming crust. It sliced like pie, but tasted like a cheeseburger. Space-age convenience at its peak. 15. Swedish meatballs. Americanized Swedish meatballs simplified tradition into ground beef balls seasoned with nutmeg and allspice, simmered in creamy gravy. Served over noodles with cranberry sauce, they felt festive without being complicated. Hamburger gravy over mashed potatoes. A Depression-era holdover that thrived in the 70s, hamburger gravy turned 1 pound of beef into dinner for 6. Flour, milk, and beef fat created a thick, peppery gravy poured over mashed potatoes. It was humble, it was comforting, it worked. 16. Beef and cabbage skillet. Cabbage was cheap and filling. Cooked down with ground beef and onions, it became tender, sweet, and deeply savory. It stretched budgets without sacrificing flavor. 17. Meatloaf muffins. By baking meatloaf in muffin tins, cooks cut the cooking time in half. Each portion developed a caramelized crust all around, practical and kid-approved. 18. Porcupine rice bake. Uncooked rice mixed directly into ground beef, baked in tomato sauce until the grains puffed up like tiny quills. It was clever, economical, and almost entirely hands-off. 21. Beef enchilada casserole. Layered tortillas, seasoned ground beef, canned sauce, beans, and cheese baked into a bubbly dish that made weeknight dinners easier. Not traditional, but loved all the same. The 1970s weren't glamorous in the kitchen. They were practical. They were creative. They were about stretching, adapting, and feeding a family no matter what the headline.